Let's see if we get any sound. Sound. Still trying to get sound. It's starting to happen there, I think. Do we have sound? Do we not have sound? How about now? Is it happening? It's still not happening. How's that? Are we happening? Nope.
Do we know? Because all the testing happened right before you got here, and it was working fine. Huh. Let's see. The other side is on this guy's.
So test.
This guy's getting levels.
So that all looks fine, right? Test. Chaos at the Dharma Collective.
Moving closely.
What's that?
We all move in really closely. We're on a bus.
I know, except for the internetoids, the netizens will be left out.
We can't leave out our internet sangha.
That's right, the netasanga and the metasanga are vital. Start doing a sound check, just keep meditating, okay? Are the speakers turned on? Yeah, okay. Test. Testing. Okay. That does not seem to be the...
right before you walked in.
Yeah.
All set up. It was
That's always a wise move.
okay.
Testing, testing, testing. Meditation. Keep meditating just a few more minutes. And then we'll just forge ahead. Sure. Oh, we got sound.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Testing your equanimity. How's the volume for those in back? Is that okay? I have a major request. Can somebody nuke that, please? So that I can get, can somebody please just microwave that so we can get going? I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, Ray. Tell me when we're live, Antonio, to the world. We're streaming. All right, after that wonderful, blissful, and exciting fiasco, we are ready to go. And you can hear how hot the mic is, right? It's just on the edge of feedback the whole time. That's always really pleasant. It fills me with equanimity and a sense of peace. So just breathe that in. So I see a ton of new faces here tonight, which is great. Welcome, everybody. You're getting dumped into the middle of a class. So last week was week 1 of a 4-week class. This is week 2. So if you are completely confused, you have no clue what I'm talking about, just hang in there. And remember that week 1 is available online. You can watch it to get caught up, okay? Because these classes go so fast, going back and reviewing all of week 1 would, I think, be overall deleterious to the forward movement. So I'm just going to dive in and do my best to bring everybody with me, okay? If, again, it just causes you to feel lost and upset, then, meditate on equanimity with feelings of loss, being lost and upset. Good, so this is the class I call Hacking the Stack. Thank you so much, I deeply appreciate it. Which has another name, which I believe is Deconstructing Sensory Experience and Nondual Meditation. Very, unambitious title. But essentially we call it Hacking the Stack. And the idea is that we are using a 4-part map. And last week I gave my giant disclaimer about why maps totally suck and you should never use one and never believe one and throw out all maps and tear them up after burning them and throwing the ashes into the ocean. So just know that maps in meditation are just vile. And now we're going to continue with this map. This map teaches you how to work with your sensory experience to go deeper in vipassana. So it's not a map of reality, it's not a map of all types of meditation, it's not a map of, spiritual growth or something like that. This is simply how you work with vipassana meditation to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And it sort of shows you 4 basic stages. So the 4 stages. This is the entirety of the review. Ready? Stage 1, encountering sensory phenomena conceptually. Stage 2, encountering sensory phenomena phenomenologically. Stage 3, encountering sensory phenomena as vibratory wave phenomena. Stage 4, encountering pure awareness. That's it. Those are the 4 stages. Last week we covered 1 and 2 pretty well. This week we're going to cover more about 2, the phenomenological stage of really encountering details of sensory experience. And we're kind of doing more on this stage 2 and then moving into stage 3. Okay? So there you go. That's your review. Hope everybody got all that, you know. And if not, we'll be covering this quite a bit. So I'm sure you'll pick it up. As a little bit more of a review, this is a question put out there to the class. What is a valid object of vipassana? Anybody? What's that?
Anything.
Particularly any sensory experience, right? Exactly. Any sensory experience. So we tend to think of vipassana as being only about, let's say, our body sensations of breathing, or maybe body sensations generally, like body, 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 or maybe like the sound outside or something. But no, it is literally any sensory experience. And in the Buddhist way of talking about it, sensory experience includes your mind, like thoughts and various types of thinking. So any of that is a valid object for vipassana, meaning we can do this thing we're describing of slowly deconstructing our way down the stack of sensory experience, even with things like thoughts. So don't assume that this just applies to feeling your body sensations of breathing or something. It applies to everything, and as you'll see tonight, that becomes a big deal, right? A very big deal. So I'm going to just write some stuff on the board to help with the class tonight. We've got our 4 levels. Every time I write this, I have to take a deep breath because maps are no good, but totally necessary. Good. So those are our 4 levels. And last week we talked quite a bit about the conceptual level, and that this is not somehow like a value-laden map. It's not that the conceptual level is bad and we've got to get rid of concepts and we're just trying to get down to that awareness. And this is why I keep criticizing maps, because as soon as I put that up there, and I did this same thing when I first saw maps like this. All most people think about is, how do I get to level 4 and fuck everything else? That's where I'm trying to get. And that's just not the case. We can do really powerful, interesting, useful stuff at level 1, even in meditation, right? Not just in our lives and our work and all that, but also there's conceptual meditations like we did last week. But eventually, if we want to dig down and do the deconstruction thing, get into sensory experience, start to, really kind of like put the tendrils of our attention down into the real delicious, loamy soil of sensory experience, we've got to go into the phenomena. Right? So rather than just the idea about it, or the word about it, or the meaning, or like the tag cloud associated with the object, we're getting into the details of the sensory experience of the object. Last week I talked a lot about apples, right? I drew an apple on the board and, talked about like the details of sensory experience of an apple, the various colors, the shine on it, the shadow, the sound of your mouth crunching into it, the sound of the wind touching the leaf, the way it would taste in your mouth if you bit into it, the way it would feel in your hands, all that kind of stuff. That's the beginning, the very, very beginning of getting into the phenomena of the apple, right? Not what an apple means, not the history of apples, none of the conceptual stuff, just the right in the moment sensory experience of the apple, right? At this phenomenological level, meaning what it is like in the senses underneath the conceptual level. So I will write a word using English letters, but it's a word from the Pali language, the religious language of early Buddhism. And this word is Yata Bhuttadasana. Remember, THs in Pali don't sound like it's just pronounce it like a T for now. Yata Bhuttadasana. And sometimes we might add in jnana there. So what does that word mean? Can everyone see that? Yata Bhuttadasana? Pali words look like German words or whatever. It's like they just tend to slam like lots of nouns together. Dasana basically means to view, to look at, to understand. That would be cognate to the Sanskrit word darshana, right? So to see something, to understand it. And this means as it is. I mean, there's a lot of various English translations. And sometimes, put this in the wrong spot. There, we've got our tilde, N-A. If we add that in, it's not only to understand it, but to know it. Right? Yata Bhuta Jnana Dasana. So usually this is translated as seeing things as they are. Okay? So the idea is we're going to drop out of the conceptual level, we're going to drop out of ideas about things, and instead just contact them as they really are. Now the whole idea of this deconstructive stack model is that each layer we're actually dropping more and more constructs. The highest level of construct we're calling concepts. But we're even going to drop the constructs around the phenomenology and eventually even drop the constructs around the vibration. So in one way of looking at it, we could say we're never really seeing it as it really is until we're down at 4. But in another way of looking at it, we're seeing it as it really is more and more clearly at each of these levels, okay? And there's this idea that you hear a lot about in vipassana of like naked seeing or bare awareness, where you're just there with the object in the sensory experience without adding anything onto it. Now, that's, in one way of looking at it, kind of impossible. You're always going to add some stuff onto it. But the idea of this stack, one way of understanding it is each layer down, we're adding less and less onto it. We're kind of doing less processing of the information and less categorizing and massaging of the data. And as we go down, we're letting go of that until there's as little of that as possible. So this is this idea of seeing things as they really are, Yata Bhuttadasana, or seeing and knowing things as they really are. So this is a huge concept in Buddhism, right? Very, very important. If we take it like as a religious or spiritual concept, you're going to do vipassana on any sensory experience and eventually see the truth of, the 3 marks of existence and see, let's say, dependent co-arising and all that stuff as you're looking at it. it remains to be, we can discuss at great length whether those ideas themselves represent concepts that we're adding on or not. But that would be the idea. As we're going deeper and deeper and deeper into our experience of anything, we're seeing it more and more clearly and less as an idea, right? Everybody getting this? And again, like I said last week, this is sort of meditation move number one. Like from your first day of meditation to the day it starts to work, the day it starts to work is the day you're starting to go into the phenomena. Because before that, unless you're doing conceptual meditation, analytical meditation, you're going to keep just bouncing off the concept of, let's say, body sensation. Yep, that's my body, that's my leg, that's my leg, that's my leg. That's not a good meditation. And you're going to feel really bored and restless and confused because sitting there knowing that's your leg isn't helping. And if you did like a little more analytical type meditation with it, you'd be like, well, there's my leg joint and there's, the muscle. You could start to really feel all the individual parts and label them. But notice how that's already getting a little bit, tiny bit more phenomenological. Because it's like, oh, this thing that I was labeling leg is actually made of these various parts, and I can feel the parts individually. So even sinking in more deeply conceptually, we're already starting to lightly go into this second level. And remember, these are not discrete levels, it's really just a big continuum. I'm just giving it names to help you understand the continuum. And we could move those around quite a bit. So instead of going, that's my leg, or even these are the parts of my leg, when we move to level 2, we start to go, oh, those are the sensations of the leg. And now without words, it's like, remember, like, where does it feel like it's located? How big does it feel like it is? What's the feeling of the three-dimensional shape, which might be incredibly different than your mental concept of how it's supposed to be shaped, and we go with how it feels. The textures, the density, the pressure, the temperature, all that kind of feeling quality stuff when we're working with a body sensation, right? That's getting into this second level, and that's like, again, that's when meditation, vipassana style meditation really gets moving, right? When you start digging in like that. And remember, we're doing this for every other sense gate too. Listening, instead of just going, that's a car, that's a bird, that's somebody sneezing, that's somebody, walking. We're just hearing the sound in a very, very, sound of the sound, crispy. What's the texture of the sound? What's the intensity of the sound, the volume, the way it's kind of like changing subtly, all that. You're getting into the sound of the sound or the feeling of the feeling, right? That's the phenomenological level. And what's so amazing about this is it's like the antidote for our current culture. Right, our current culture is tag cloud world. Everything is simply an idea about something. And that turns out to be really efficient and really fast and also really aggressive and empty. There's, in the negative sense of empty, it's very hard to get any nutrients or any kind of sustenance or savoriness out of a bunch of concepts, right? Whereas, bite into the cake and actually taste it, and now you're getting some sustenance, you're getting some savoriness, because it's a carrot cake, it's not just sweet, it's savory, and you're getting, experience. So, we're getting pushed culturally more and more up into concept land with everything. And So beginning to be able to contact things phenomenologically is hugely, I'm going to make up a word here, I think, antidotal. Right? It's hugely, what's the real word for that? Palliative to this, condition of conceptual, trying to live up only in the mind, like from the neck up entirely kind of thing. And maybe even because there's senses in your, tongue and nose and stuff, it's almost like up here. So being able to contact phenomenology that way is crucial. It's really interesting. The arts are very good at teaching this, right? And you can use art practice to help you to do this kind of meditation better. So, for example, drawing, right? There's a book I often mention and recommend to people called, from the 80s, but it's continuously in reprint since the 80s because it's such a popular text, called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. Raise your hand if you're aware of this book. Yeah, it's just a fun book about how to draw. But what the exercises are is moving from level 1 to level 2 with drawing. Because what people do that makes their drawings terrible is they're drawing things conceptually. Oh, I know a table has 4 legs, so I make a square and draw 4 lines, and it looks like shit, right? But you've got it conceptually, the table. Or a cup, like if you tell most people to draw a cup, they kind of do an icon of a cup, and it looks really bad. And so the whole premise of this book is to teach you to see the things as they really are, rather than your idea about them. So you do a whole bunch of exercises to, for example, see a table as you really see it, rather than your concept of a table. Using negative space exercises, or turn it upside down, all kinds of stuff that break your conceptual ideas about table, or about cup, or about a plant. The most unbelievable transformations are when she has like beginners do plants, because at first they're just drawing the kind of flower you did when you were 3, because that's concept flower. And instead she has people do like negative space drawing, right? Where drawing the negative space, you don't have any concepts about what the negative space is supposed to look like. So you actually can see that as a phenomena. There's not a concept in your mind of what that space is supposed to be shaped like. So you draw the negative space around the leaves and the petals, and it just instantly looks great because you're actually drawing what's there, right? So that helps, those kind of exercises with sight and with sound, and a lot of what we would think of as sort of like somatic, embodied meditation exercises are very, very, very good for helping you to get into meditating at this level, right? Make sense? And just to be super un-Buddhist for a minute, or at least I'll be very Vajrayana, let's put it that way, very later Buddhist. Living here in the Bay Area, sommelier training, right? Sommelier training is going from concepts to phenomena. It's training you to drink wine, or there's even whiskey sommeliers and stuff. God knows how I would know that. And, the whole idea is to learn to taste every little component of these beverages by being super mindful of the smell and taste, right? And even doing interesting exercises like, they give you bottles of pure smell or bottles of pure tastes. This is just cherry, this is just leather smell, this is just charcoal or whatever. And you get really used to the perfectly pure taste or smell of that thing, and then you begin to be able to distinguish it in a glass of a drink. And so that's those kind of trainings in any sense gate are really good for for helping you to meditate more deeply. And conversely, working with meditation at this level is great for art. It's great for any creative thing, and also just more deeply, both art and meditation at this level are wonderful for enjoyment of life, right? Actually, being present for, just to be so cliche, being present for the sunset over the ocean. Something that I see every single day, especially as a teacher, are people who work very, 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 very hard to have a good experience, to generate a good experience, like go on a vacation or go on a retreat or do something. They work all year to get that thing, and then they go on it and are incapable of enjoying it or even kind of noticing it. Right? They're so caught up in their mind they can't actually be present on the beach they paid $2,000 to go to or whatever. And that's a fucking tragedy, right? That just should never happen. But we have trouble dropping out of concepts because we're really locked up in there, and most of our jobs are about that. How do we work with this? You meditate, you do art type things, enjoyment of the senses type things that keep anchoring you back in the present moment sensory experience on the phenomenological level, right? So before I go bend this into something really interesting and weird and we do some meditations, any questions about this overarching concept? We covered it a lot last week. Good. Okay, so remember I said that any sensory experience counts. We can do this with any sensory experience. And that in Buddhism, we're going to include our mind as a sensory experience. So this leads to some pretty weird shit. For example, we can meditate on thinking. And we can also do phenomenological meditation on emotion, which isn't actually in the mind in this way of thinking about it, but still in our society, our body, we don't have comparatively a ton of concepts about it. We mainly just kind of ignore it unless it's in pain. So coming into the phenomenological stuff with the body is about kind of, deciding it matters and then paying attention to it in that way. Sounds like we just got all extra feedbacky again. But things like the emotions and things especially like thinking, we have a tremendous amount of concepts about, right? It's very, very rare that we would, for example, have an emotion and not bring along an intense truckload of ideas about that emotion. In fact, talking to, your average North American, and you say, let's say it's someone this isn't just a social nicety where you're asking someone how you doing. You're really asking, how are you doing? And they might say something like, I'm angry. And then there will follow like 5 minutes of why they're angry. This happened and that happened, and then I did this and then they did that, and this is going on over here and it made it like this. So in other words, the very first thing they said, I'm angry, is the answer to the question. And the rest of it is a concept about that really, in a way, doesn't matter. In another way, of course, it does, but that's all ideas about the anger. If we were to examine that same emotion as a phenomena, the answer would be really different. Super different. It wouldn't be this happened and that happened and I'm like this and they're like that and then, these other people said this. It would be, how you feeling? Oh, I'm angry. And like eyebrows are tense and furrowing, and my jaw is really tight and clenched. My throat is closing, and these muscles here are getting really bulgy and tense, and I can feel my heartbeat in my forehead. And I might even be seeing some red, and my shoulders are hunching, and my fists are getting balled up, and my diaphragm's tense, and my breathing's getting fast, and that's the answer to how are you feeling. That's the phenomenology of an emotion in the body, right? It's a experience. Notice that none of that talked about why. None of that talked about who did what or who deserved this or my reaction, their reaction. None of that's there. This is just present moment. How does it feel? In this case, in your body. Right? Again, we could go to other sense gates, but that's what the anger feels like as an emotion. And check out how different that is. That's an experience. And it's really contacting at a very, very high sensory clarity in your body in the present moment, dropping you out of the concepts entirely. So what's fascinating about this is how powerful that is for improving your life immediately. Because 95% of what's horribly uncomfortable about an emotion is your ideas about it. I shouldn't be having this. I need to do something. I need to do something to get rid of it. I need to do something about the thing that triggered it. I need to say this. I need to do it. Concept, 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 concept. All of it is way up here, just going, right? That's where all the suffering is. The actual feeling in your body is just kind of uncomfortable. And it's not even that much more uncomfortable than I have a tummy ache. But you don't see people typically, unless they're real hypochondriacal, going, oh my God, I have a little tummy ache, a little indigestion. What am I going to do about it? Who am I going to talk to? Got to go to the doctor. Got to go. There are some people like that, but that's not really, your typical reaction to a mild tummy ache. It's just, mild tummy ache. So what? So as you contact even extremely, what we would normally consider very upsetting emotions, understand 95% of the upset is way up there in the ideas about it, the idea that it shouldn't be there, the idea that you have to make it go away or do something. Whereas if you drop into the feeling and don't do anything about it, it's actually, you almost always, not always, but almost always, no big deal at all in terms of the pain of it or the suffering of it. The actual physical experience of that emotion is just no big deal. And I don't know about you, but given the choice between a giant freak out about an emotion and being like, mild anger, I would choose the latter. Same experience. And of course, that doesn't mean you don't figure out what's wrong eventually, or you don't do something about it, but you would be doing that kind of stuff from a place of real equanimity with this emotion, not just reactivity. So working with dropping out of the conceptual level into the phenomenological level with emotions is like life-changing meditation thing number one. Like, if you can get that, meditation has already, paid its way in your life. You will already be glad you learned it. You will never stop doing it forever if you can get this one thing. So we're going to do this as a meditation. Let's take questions first. Everybody understand it? Yes?
What do you mean by drop into an habit and emotion? How do you that feel?
It's amazing to me because everyone asks questions like that, right? It's a totally normal question, and it's because we have this idea. She's asking, how do you know what an emotion feels like? What's it mean to drop into an emotion in your body? And that is a totally normal question in society right now. And what's fascinating about that is the assumption is that emotions are somehow a mental event. Right? And since our kind of basic idea of psychology these days is cognitive behavioral, we think of emotions as like decisions we're making consciously and they're mental events. Now, no one would deny that emotions are triggered by the brain, but the experience of an emotion is in your body. Like I said, your brows are furrowed, your jaw is tight, your throat's closing up, your shoulders are hunched. That's anger. Right? The rest of it is ideas about anger or what's making me feel angry. But the anger is that super revved up body state. So that's what I was describing very, very detailedly is what an embodied emotion is like. Right? And so, you can learn to notice embodied emotions of every kind. And then eventually very subtle, like there's a lot of very tiny, subtle emotions going on in your face and so on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is, if you're saying we should lean into the feeling of it and not fight it, does that mean when you feel sad, you should cry, but not think about why you're crying? Does that mean when you're angry, stay angry?
Not exactly. Because, so the question is, do you express the emotions? And the idea here is that there's a difference between contacting it deeply and then doing something about it. Okay? So what this is describing is contacting it deeply. Being with it, not trying to make it go away. And if it's a positive emotion, not trying to grab onto it necessarily. But just being with it, and then finding room to just allow that phenomena to be there. Okay? Then, after that, the response, like actually what you do, becomes conscious, becomes a decision. Maybe after you said it does feel appropriate to cry, great. But for most people, there's no gap there. They feel the emotion, they react. I'm enraged, so I punch something, like it's just mechanistic. So it's the Viktor Frankl quote, right? Between stimulus and response, there's a gap. That gap is our freedom. And this is exactly what this is about. It's like you've got the stimulus of the emotion happening, you're just being with it. And then the response can come from a different place after the meditation. But during the sit, you are simply being with the feelings in the body. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes?
That's interesting to me that crying would be something that's like, I can see how crying would be a response, especially if it's a display or an expression. But
It might just happen involuntarily.
And that would be more like the phenomenon of like...
It could be, yeah. But usually you'll notice that there's a runaway chain of thought and feeling, thought and feeling, thought and feeling. And so it's getting mixed up with the concepts there often. Not always.
Yeah.
There's no hard line there.
One other quick one. You contrasted reacting to like, was it experience? Like
Responding,
yeah. Okay. Got it.
So we're, response and reactivity, very different.
Right.
In a way, remember, like in Asian languages, meditation, the result of meditation is not enlightenment. There's no enlightenment word. The two words are either awakening, you're going to wake up to what's really going on, things as they really are, or you're going to be free. Freedom, right, is the other word, moksha, or several other words. And so what's the freedom? Well, one of the freedoms is the freedom from that mechanical reactivity. You know, if we look at the tragedy of human existence is like, my grandparents beat my parents and my parents beat me, therefore I will beat my children, and that's called life, right? And it's just this mechanical response. Or like family systems theory, well, the dad beats the mom and the mom beats the older kid and the older kid beats the younger kid and the younger kid beats the dog, right? That's family systems theory right there. You know, shit rolls downhill. I'm a youngest child in a big family, so I always felt that one very poignantly. Right? That's all just the mechanics of samsaric horror, right? Like it's just reactivity, the domino effect of just passing the pain along forever, right? It's the opposite of freedom. And that's what reactivity is. Whereas if we can be with our uncomfortable feelings, we build up some space, we actually start removing dominoes from the chain. There's space in there, and actual responses can happen instead of reactions. This is how we break this cycle of reactivity that's so damaging, right? And if you do nothing good in your life proactively, like you don't found a hospital or don't, whatever, but you still just broke the chain of passing on the damage, you would have done something amazing for the world, right? It spreads out from you in all directions. Just the domino effect of doom is not happening after you, right? So it's a big deal. So thank you for your question about reactivity. Yes?
I don't know if there's a distinction between you saying making contact with something, just experiencing it, and then just hang out there and experience it. And that's what I do sometimes. I can just hang out with that experience and even merge with it, but never go anywhere further from that unless I notice something else. Versus having an intention to investigate or explore the experience. Because then like last week, you gave the exercise of what's the texture, what's the shape, does it have a feel? So there's almost kind of like an activity or an intention, as opposed to just feel it and experience it and don't do anything beyond that.
Yeah, you're asking about like how effortful it is.
Maybe.
Yeah, and so in this case, we're going down the stack, it's effortful. And you are doing active investigation. Now, I would say that's not that much different than just hanging out with something with very good clarity. You're not necessarily you're definitely not asking mental questions in verbal ways. So you're just being with it, but really exploring it. Remember, vipassana means, one of the translations of that word is seeing clearly or seeing through things, but a third translation that is very important is essentially analysis. Stripping it apart, deconstructing it, right? So you're getting into the details in a very structured way or deconstructive way. Okay?
So in that sense, that is the difference between maybe the concentration where you focus it, attention never moves, versus this where it kind of does because it's drilling down like a little drill. And so it is micro movements.
This is the difference between, shamatha style meditation and vipassana. Right? With shamatha, we're not investigating like that. Vipassana, we are definitely investigating. Okay? So let's try this for a minute. So phenomenological meditation on emotion. We will do this relatively briefly. So there's two ways into this. One, you're feeling an emotion. You just know you're happy right now. Go find it in your body. Oh, it's in my face, around my mouth. I can feel that in the smile. I can feel the uplift in my chest. And you just explore those the way we explored body sensation last week. The feeling of the location, the feeling of the size, the shape, the texture, the pressure, the density, all that, but also just the raw emotional quality of it. Right? Because there's an added factor in there when it's an emotional body sensation. It's got emotional valence. It has a flavor. So that's one way. You know you're having an emotion. Go find it in your body and then investigate that sensation. Another way of doing this is to scan your body until you find something that feels emotional. The next question is always, how do I know it feels emotional? And my answer is, how do you know that salt tastes salty? Right? It's a quality. So you will know when a sensation feels emotional because, sorry to do this to you, it feels emotional. You can easily notice ones that don't. For example, probably the sensation in your knees is devoid of emotional qualities, at least in the knees. The typical locations for emotional type body sensations are the belly, the chest, the throat, and the face. We tend to have a lot of emotional sensations there. So find that feeling of emotion, that quality of emotional body sensation, and just be with it. Notice, because of our society, because of a whole bunch of reasons, you want to go, why is that there? What do I do to get rid of it? What do I have to go do? You can thank capitalism for that. They're going to sell you the cure. But what we want to do instead is just feel it. Letting go of concepts about it. Over and over again, just come back to the embodied experience. You may be surprised to discover that you have a hard time knowing what you're feeling. Well, guess what? This is how to know what you're feeling. The challenge with this is not so much to do the phenomenological investigation, feeling the feeling of the emotion. Some people, it takes a while to learn to do that, but for most people, you can contact it. They don't have to be big, by the way. They can, almost always, they're minuscule, tiny little wisps of this and that. I often hear, well, I don't feel any big emotion. And I'm like, notice you put the word big in there. Doesn't have to be big. It can be in your face, it can be a twinge in your eyebrow, it can be a tiny little tension in your throat. All kinds of stuff feels emotional. Good. So that's just a little tiny experiment with that. Any quick reports or questions? So maybe you noticed sitting with an uncomfortable emotional flavor is not something we tend to do a lot of, but it's actually pretty easy. Very few emotions, very few negative or difficult emotions are, incapacitatingly painful or something. Some could be, but it's very rare. Usually they're incredibly mild, unpleasant, but mild, and it's all the ideas about it that are driving you crazy. Upregulate, upregulate, upregulate. What am I going to do? What's wrong? It's all that idea level, and that is generating a secondary emotion of anxiety. Right? So that's where we're just adding to our suffering. So it's really interesting that you can do this one little move of just dropping into the phenomena and like free your life. Right? Suddenly, anxiety is no longer controlling every moment of your day. Or trying to get rid of that guilt or shame is not controlling every moment of your day, because what if you just sat with it? And interestingly, sitting with them also tends to help to resolve certain emotions. Very, very interesting. There's a lot there, emotional meditation, we could do a whole year on it, but I just want you to see the difference of dropping from concept into phenomena. There's a big deal. And what would we call that in this case? What quality about our emotion are we getting when we're dropping out of the concept? What's that? We're going into the phenomenological level, but what quality are we building in ourselves? Equanimity, right? Which just means the ability to be with it. Right? Just, you're not resisting it, you're not controlling it, you're not all tense I'm not going to do anything. It's not like that. It's just, okay, just sit with it. Sit with it, sit with it. And, what's the fourth jhana, right? You got all these intense jhanas of all these different things. What's the fourth one? Equanimity. And it's from that fourth jhana that according to some suttas, that's where the Buddha got awakened, getting into equanimity and then doing vipassana, right? What's the fourth Brahmavihara? We've got all these things: compassion, loving kindness, sweetness. We've got those three Brahmaviharas. What's the fourth one? Upekkha, which means what? Equanimity, right? And it's the same thing. That equanimity is extremely powerful state. Thanks for saying it in Sanskrit. I like Sanskrit, but we're doing Pali right now, upekkha, right? So equanimity, very, very powerful thing to develop. So we have equanimity with body sensations of emotion. It starts to massively open up your feeling of pleasantness of existence, right? All your emotions aren't the world's biggest problem. That must be solved immediately. Well, the weather is happening, emotions are happening. So again, we don't tend to think of this as a thing you can even meditate on in that way, but absolutely that's what you do. Dropping out of the conceptual into the phenomenological, very powerful. And of course, just to harken back to last week, doing the concept thing in an analytical way, like with a therapist or something, going through it conceptually and understanding the whys and whens and what to do's, that's all useful and powerful and interesting and effective. So it's not like that's wrong, but notice that that's a kind of conceptual meditation that's also building equanimity and also building solutions and stuff. It's, again, not just pure reactivity. So there's some interesting stuff there. Quick questions about emotions? Yes. What is your name, miss? Karen. I'm
Um,
teasing Karen.
I'm sitting here with the thought of trying to understand what emotion is if there's confusion, which I mean, there's could be a lot said about that, but in feeling something, the process of labeling that feels very conceptual to me, so
Yes.
how do, yeah, like that feels...
Is labeling conceptual, or is figuring out the right label conceptual? We talked about it last week. So it can be the case that sitting there trying to name it gets real concept-y. So in the vanilla form of the way I teach this meditation, like the default form, you don't label it as a particular emotion, you just call it emotion. That way, the label is as unconceptual as possible, and you're just contacting the feeling. There's a special exercise where if you just happen to know what it is, you can sit there and label the type. And if we go back up to conceptual meditation a little bit, you can then begin to label emotions and learn them.
I just think of fear and excitement, are often confused with anxiety and...
Yeah. And so again, this is a gradient, and so we're not trying to banish every bit of concept. You can't really do that. But what we can do is not try to hang out in the figuring it out. And in fact, if you were going to do that kind of meditation, like we're going to distinguish between fear and excitement, you would have a third label of not sure. So instead of grinding, you could just go, I'm not sure about that one, and keep going, right? So there's ways to make it less of a thought experiment and more of a feeling experience. Good. Okay. Yes.
Last one. And if you know what it is pre-verbally, there shouldn't be any need for any
mental chatter, even the word or that, whatever you're using to note it. Would that not be necessary if pre-verbally you know this is fear, this is whatever, but you don't even have to have that mental chatter telling you, not mental chatter, but that word, that voice.
Is noting necessary? Noting is never necessary, but neither is it always, it's never bad either. You can have a deep, deep, deep ass meditation while still noting, because it's not like this long thought process, right? You already know the word, so the word isn't going to wreck your meditation.
That's true. But what is the purpose of it then, other than just to keep you distinguishing and breaking it down?
It could help you concentrate. It could help you just be in the rhythm of it. Maybe it's just arising. But so what's the purpose of being afraid of it arising, right? We're never afraid of thoughts. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right, and that is the perfect segue to the next thing, which is the weirdest one. It blows everybody's mind. Put a helmet on to keep your brain inside your skull right now, because I'm just going to fuck you up. Okay, this is just it, right? And that is, not only can we do non-conceptual, in quotes, meditation on body sensations of emotion, but as I said, we can do non-conceptual meditation on thoughts. What? Anybody, is everyone's brain still in their head? Let me say it again. You can do non-conceptual meditation on thoughts. Right? How do we do that? What does that even mean? Doesn't that sound like I'm saying we can do non-conceptual meditation on concepts? What? You guys don't seem adequately mind blown right now. I'm not noticing any total decompensation responses or screams or anything. I know, it's like, the equanimity is too great, that's it.
You just kind of label it a thought, like notice it's a thought?
No!
Okay.
We do not just label it a thought, that's dismissive labeling, which is the way you do vipassana on something else. I'm going to be meditating on my body sensation of emotion over here. A thought is arising. I either totally ignore it, or if it's very persistent, I might dismissively label it thought to kind of nudge it away. Right? So that's dismissive labeling, great technique, but that's not what I'm describing. I'm talking about full vipassana on the thing. How does it work? Yes?
You meditate on the sounds of your thoughts. Perhaps they arise as colors or like the sensory information of thoughts.
Correct. So thoughts are made of language or pictures. Language, guess what, is just a bunch of sounds. And mental images, mental pictures of things are just some colors and shapes and textures. So again, even making mental talk into words is already bumping yourself up into concepts. Now you popped out of the womb, like with a, just absolute turbocharger in your brain to learn words. So it's not like that's just going to go away. That was like the first thing, your first job in life. But you can still learn to encounter thought as sound in the present moment. So most meditation, especially vipassana, is going to teach you, oh my God, if I thought, I can hear Eckhart Tolle right now, if it's, you're thinking about the future or the past, you're just screwed. Like you must come back to the holy present moment, right? And somehow thoughts are illegal. Or thoughts of the future and past, like time travel thoughts are illegal. Or whatever. And so there's a whole part of your totally natural experience that's just firewalled off and you're supposed to stop your mind from thinking. And to me, this is just ridiculous, right? Why is that illegal? What's so bad about thinking? I just don't get it. And in fact, if you begin to do phenomenological meditation on your thinking, you will discover that it is incredibly pleasant as a sound experience, or incredibly pleasant as a visual experience, outside of its concepts, or outside of its meaning. And in fact, it's not really that different from breathing, or your heart beating or whatever. It's just, there's an organ in your chest that's beating, there's an organ in your head that's doing its thing. It's just not that different. In fact, it starts to feel really smooth and natural and nice. And I could go on and will another time, but we're going to do this quickly because it's already almost 9. These classes go way too fast. So what I want you to do, we'll let go of mental images and just work with mental talk. The idea is simple. Don't try to think, but don't try to not think. That's simple. In other words, don't do anything with your thinking, but just listen to it. Number 2, you're going to understand the concepts. So it's not that suddenly you're not going to understand English in your head or whatever language you're thinking in. But even with that, try to listen to the sound of it, which is like, wah, 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 like the parents in a Peanuts cartoon, right? It just has this rhythm of speech. And it's loud and it's soft and it's consonants and it's vowels and it has timbre and so on. Right? So we'll just do this for a few minutes. Each time you find yourself getting caught up in the meaning, come back to just listening. And if there's no sound, then you just listen to the silence. Okay? Each time you find yourself caught in the meaning of the words, just come back to listening. Just hear the sounds as sounds. Good. So again, we could do a nice long year or two just on that kind of meditation. I certainly love it. It's one of my favorite meditations, to sit with the effortless, spontaneous arising of mental image and mental talk. And it becomes very, very, very soothing, and it's like an inner fountain of just natural spontaneity and freshness, right? There's everything beautiful about it as a phenomena. Questions or comments about that meditation? How did I know you were going to ask one?
I wasn't asking, it's going to be a description.
Good.
It's when I do this, it's kind of like being in a restaurant and just hearing the background noise, but it's comforting in that sense. And I also realize it's, when I listen to music, even more music with the lyrics, I never pay attention to the lyrics because I treat that as just part of the music.
Part of the sound,
The sounds, especially bands like other end that don't mean anything anyway. So there's something about just hearing the sort of the chapter is all part of it. But it also feels like I'm playing knives because it's like...
Did you imply that the end of the world as we know it is a meaningless song? Oh my God, get that note. Okay, yes, thank you for your report. This is a wonderful way to work with mental talk or mental image.
And if you do that, if you work with this practice, just doing that,
Does that actually, do you build up a tolerance of not being pulled away so you don't have to use shamatha and stuff as a way of being focused?
Does practicing like this help you not get distracted by thinking? Notice you are still conceptualizing thinking as a problem that you're trying to not be distracted by.
Yeah.
In fact, what I want you to get is, no, you can remember what's a valid shamatha object? A sensory experience, and in this case, mind experiences are considered to be sensory experiences. You can deeply focus on that, right? It's very powerful. So, but the answer to your question is yes. Sherry?
We have two technical questions. One is, so some thoughts I do feel like I hear, but others appear like they feel silent and immediate. Like just a download of a concept is flashed in my mind. It feels like there's not as much sensory experience to grab onto. Am I, do I just need to keep going until I get better at discerning the flashes? Or?
Yeah, so what happens if the thought is too fast to notice?
Yeah, I guess so. It feels like there's no sound even simulated.
I challenge you to discover how you know you're having one.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
So I was just not picking up on it yet. But then, so I've tried to do this with mental images, And the problem there for me is that in order to get into the details of the image, I feel like I'm keeping the thought alive in a way. So
Yes. So, with mental images, they move very fast. We can feel like we have to hang on to them to be able to look at the color and shape and texture and all that. I certainly did that for a long, long time. Shinzen kept saying sensory clarity, sensory clarity, sensory clarity. So I'm like, okay, there's the image. Now I'm going to hang on to it and, explore it. That's not how you do that. Okay, now just as a sidebar, that's still a great meditation. I mean, if you can hang on to a mental image and explore it, you're getting very focused, right? So it's still powerful meditation, but in mental image meditation, if they're moving fast, you just notice what you can as fast as they're moving. You're not trying to slow them down. Yeah. Let's back off the technical questions until, another time. Yes?
So this is just more of an observation with myself. So I have a lot of mental chatter all the time, which almost drives me crazy. And yet when I tried to do that, as soon as we started, it went away. Until we stopped in meditation, and then it came back immediately.
Yeah,
It was
so
weird.
sometimes when we pay attention to it, it goes away. Usually that's because you're not used to paying attention to it. And so once you get used to paying attention to it, it will start coming back, but it comes back in a different way. So notice part of the situation that allows mental chatter to become annoying is that we're not really paying attention. And so what if part of its annoyance is it's trying to get your attention? And if you give it some attention, it's done. The message was received somehow or whatever. That is very common. So actually paying attention to it tends to chill it out a little bit. Yes?
Yeah, report. When I first started, the thoughts of the words almost slowed down as I was observing them. And after that, it kind of melted in the background and on equal footing with all the other sounds around it, and then it kind of increased in intensity a bit. Yeah, I think it would be interesting to do this more in this experience.
It's a great meditation, right? But thank you for the good phenomenological description, right? Here's what it sounded like and felt like. Yes, one more thing. Somebody over here was raising something. Hallucination. Yes.
I noticed that I was noticing a lot more of the content, sort of conceptual content of my thoughts, much more than I normally do.
Sure.
And that kind of came along with the phenomena of the sound of the thoughts too.
Yes. And as I said, you've been trained since birth to understand those sounds.
Yeah.
So, it's not the case that suddenly they're going to be all ununderstandable. And that's not the goal. Although I will say, as your concentration gets higher, your clarity gets better, you're dropping down further and further into the unconscious mind, it is often the case that all the mental talk turns to nonsense. And it literally sounds like blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's as much as you can hear of it. And again, that turns out to be very soothing and concentrating. If we're not fighting our mind all the time, just like with emotions, if you don't think it's a big problem all the time, and you in fact focus on it and have equanimity with it being there, you're not trying to make it go away or get good ones, 95% of the pain goes away, or suffering, let's say. Same thing with mental talk. Most of our problems with mental talk is, for some reason, I want it to be different or I want it to not be there. And just drop that goal and the problem is solved, right? Because it tends to be very, very less disturbing when you're not trying to change it, control it, judge yourself on it, etc., etc. So notice we haven't even got down into 3 and 4. Just dropping from 1 to 2 with some of these phenomena will change your life, will blow your mind, although nobody's mind was blown in here. It's because of the intense Buddha field of this building. Kept you all, compassionately hanging together. But just even one little move like that starts to make big benefits happen. Okay? Now, I said this week we were going to start working with level 3, so we're going to get 10 minutes of level 3 here. And, obviously this class should be quite a bit longer, but let's say we are contacting any particular phenomena. We're contacting lots of qualities about that phenomena. The texture, the pressure, the density, the temperature, the size, the three-dimensional shape, all that kind of stuff. And our concentration gets really good so that we're right with it. It's moving along and the concentration is just with it. There's no gaps in the concentration. You will begin to notice that instead of here's these qualities, it's like you're tracking each of those qualities and they're all continuously changing. So the three-dimensional shape is slowly transmogrifying. I'm talking about a body sensation as the example. The three-dimensional shape is moving like a lava lamp type thing. The spot in your body is subtly moving a little bit. It's actually growing and shrinking slightly. The texture is getting a little harder on one side and a little more gaseous on another side. Every one of those things you've been tracking is changing. And as you start to watch, your concentration gets better and better, and you're really in touch with these qualities, like a phase shift happens where the number one thing you're noticing is just this changingness. And it's not necessarily because you're trying to notice changingness. It just, when your concentration gets high enough, it becomes the most obvious thing about it. Because all the qualities are all changing. And so a weird thing happens. We're going to talk a lot about this weird thing, but at first, let's say we're meditating, you're doing a visual meditation on a brick. There's the brick, and at first it's just ideas. It's a brick, it's red, it's just the tag cloud of concepts, but then you're really going into, concentration, absorption on the qualities of this brick, getting into every little nuance of the color, the texture, every little chip and nook and cranny and the whole thing, right? All the details of the surface of this brick. And it'll get clearer and crisper and clearer and crisper and more absolutely perfectly clear and defined and sharp. And then you'll notice it starts wiggling. Every once in a while. And then it starts to become less clear because it's wiggling more and more. And starts to be like staccato chopping in vision and stuff like that, very much like trails and choppiness and stuff. And the immediate reaction is, I'm losing my concentration. My meditation is fucked, which is everyone's first reaction to any change in their, oh my God, it's fucked. And, unless you just got brain damage, it's probably not. Or unless, a big thing just happened in your life, in which case, all other things are not equal. Something's disturbing your meditation. But actually what is happening is not, the clarity's going away. It's actually the clarity got better. It actually went up. And you're beginning to notice that every quality you've been tracking is continuously changing. And so the thing that seemed like an object, remember the object I drew last week, an apple, a nice solid apple, it starts to be less solid in experience. And as we'll see, it starts to not even be that much of a thing after a while. Like apple. That concept starts, even on the phenomenological level, we're still saying that's this one thing as opposed to everything else, and assuming it's continuing over time. All of that is concepts, right? But in your own meditative experience, like pure subjectivity, you will start to discover not only is every part of that continuously changing, but the whole idea of it being a thing at all is starting to drain away. So these are the qualities of impermanence and non-self, right? It starts to seem like it's just continuously changing, and that the it is much less of an it and a lot more like some kind of phenomena, some sort of wave-like thing that's just a process. And this is not like a concept you're layering onto it. It's something you're noticing directly. Okay, so that can be, that's an enormous, massive phase shift when that starts to happen deeply. Again, this is a gradient. They all seamlessly grade into the other. But just like going from concepts to phenomena is huge, we just saw how going from concepts to phenomena in emotions is huge. Going from concepts to phenomena in thoughts is unbelievably huge. Going from the phenomenological level to the vibratory level is like night and day change. Everything is different. Things aren't even things. Stuff is not lasting from 1 minute to the next. Everything is sand held in your hands, wind in your hands, disappearing. It's a very, very particular kind of experience. And it basically happens because the things we don't even normally consider to be concepts, like the idea that it's the same object from moment to moment, is a concept. The idea that an object is separate from another object, again, not in external 3D reality, but in our subjective experience, is a concept. And so dropping those and seeing what's really there at this very high resolution, really high sensory clarity, super focused concentration, you'll start to notice that it's continuously breaking up and vibrating and doing this stuff, sometimes very subtly, sometimes really intensely. And also the whole idea that that's somehow different than anything else around it, especially when all the things around it are all vibrating too. Where's the boundary? There isn't one, right? Because it's all just vibrating together. So that is a massive phase shift where you're starting to get into the real core ideas of what vipassana is about. That things have this impermanent vibratory quality, that they're not even things, right? And then, typically with those two, we would have the idea of dukkha, or like unsatisfactoriness, the idea that even the good ones aren't hanging around. They're, vanishing. And that has this certain quality to it. So, that's, I would say, things are getting real at that point. And, you start to have very, very, very deep meditation, right? That is profoundly transformative in terms of your idea of the world and self. And that's not always that pleasant, right? This going from stage 2 to stage 3, especially if it's fast, can be where we get into dark night type territory, dukkha jnana territory. It was cool when all my problems were dissolving, but when my, love started dissolving, or my sense of who I even am starts dissolving. Right? There was a couple things in there I wanted to hang on to. Oops. So working with that becomes, that's some real stuff. When you hear about people sometimes really having, negative reactions to vipassana, it's typically, one of the, they're using either their conceptual mind or phenomenology to kind of keep their shit together. I mean, we're all doing that to some extent, but some of us are working a lot harder at that. And dissolving that too fast is like, I'm going to just, I'm going 75 here and just take my hands off the wheel. It's a car wreck. So, moving into that in a compassionate, steady, easy way with a lot of guidance is important. Right? You don't just want to slam into that at 75, because it can be, for some people, that's a bad day. Right? But in general, the increase of freedom and spontaneity, naturalness, openness, all those qualities, the super positive qualities we would associate with meditation, start to metastasize there, shall we say. They get really big. So let's do 2 minutes of meditation and then say bye-bye. Next week we'll go deeply, deeply, deeply into that. Just see if you can notice anything changing, even on a mundane level. External sound, it's continuously changing. Mental ideation, continuously changing. The body, continuously changing. It doesn't have to be such a big deal or such a radical kind of change or vibration. It can be very mundane. Your heart is continuously changing because it's beating. Your lungs are continuously changing because they're breathing in and out. The external sound is just continuously changing. Very brief meditation. Yep. We gotta go, unfortunately. We'll dive into this very deeply next week. I hope to see you then. I love teaching this class, so come on back so that I can have a good time. And now it's San Francisco Dharma Collective announcements. Who's going to do those? Ray of Light.
Hello, Sangha. Hello, Internet Sangha. Michael, thank you so much for this class. Thank you so much for all you share with us. These great insights and amazing practices. As you guys know, you know the story. We are here because of each of you and your generosity. You are the reason we're able to keep the doors open. Just ran our finances, and as we kind of expected, as I mentioned a couple months ago, we signed our lease, but our expenses have gone up. They're averaging now about $400 a day, whether we have a class or no class. And so if you can give generously, please do. Average donations in order to fund our teachers, in order to keep the doors open, are about $30 per person. That said, we're also starting to make a bigger push towards getting monthly donors. The idea is that if you are a monthly donor,
it enables us to give more of the dana during class to teachers. So we're trying these different experiments, trying around with different ideas. You can become a monthly donor on our website. There's a link there to sign up. You can also donate PayPal, Venmo, cash, check, we take it all. And we also are an official 501c3. So if you have a company that gives matching funds, let us know. We can help you figure out how you can get that information to your company for that. We have amazing SITs. We have some great stuff coming up this weekend. We have some amazing stuff coming up in March. Check us out on the calendar on the website. And feel free to talk to us after class if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mike.
Antonio, let me know when we're off.